now. All right, welcome to this Friday's Principal's Coffee. I am going to start with just an overview, and then I have a few presentations to share with you, and then I'll have time for questions at the end. So I'll go ahead and start sharing my screen. You can see, give me a thumbs up, Miss B, if you can see the screen. Perfect. All right. So a few announcements that I'll make, and then we'll go into an LCAP timeline. The LCAP is going to be starting on Monday, or opening up on Monday. So we'll start that. And then I'll also reviewing some iReady data, our most recent iReady data. And so some announcements, as you guys know, or maybe you don't know, February is Black History Month, and it's also National Random Acts of Kindness Month. And so we're going to be doing some, Miss B has a scavenger hunt for Black History Month that we're going to be doing. And then for National Random Acts of Kindness Month, for one of the weeks, we're going to be doing a kind of like a checklist for students as well. Next week, on Thursday, Dr. Kate Kinsella is coming back. She's going to be presenting some strategies for building academic language with our students. We've had her the last 3 years. Vargas, Landels, and Amy Imai are bringing her to our school district, and she's a fantastic educator and has lots of strategies to support our students, and how you can support your students at home. She's going to present to the teachers as well, and then later on she'll present to parents. I'm also going to talk a little bit about volunteers, and then also after school clubs that are starting. And so for volunteers, in February, we're going to be opening up to volunteers. All volunteers on our campus will need proof of vaccination before they come onto campus. So they need to provide proof that they are vaccinated. And that's really to help make sure that our students are safe. At the end of the day, student safety is our #1 priority, in addition to instruction and growing our students. There are also, for regular volunteers, so students or parents who are going to be in classrooms regularly, we do require fingerprinting. We want to make sure that the adults in the room are safe to be around kids, and so there's a fingerprint requirement. And then also, you must be TB tested and provide that results. And then, just like all of our employees wear masks and our students wear masks, volunteers must wear masks at all times while on campus. The TB test, there's a link. I'm going to share this presentation a little bit later. The TB test will need to be done with your doctor. And so there's a way to do that here. After school clubs, we're hoping, our tentative start date is February 14th. And we have 5 after school classes that we're going to be offering to start with. We're going to have coding for 4th and 5th grade. SNAP circuits are going to be for 3rd through 5th grade. We're going to be doing French for K2, so kindergarten through 2nd grade. We're going to have fitness class. And so Ms. Hammer is going to lead students through a bunch of fitness activities and sports fundamentals, 3rd through 5th grade. And then hopefully we'll do K2 in the 2nd round. And then we have a play in a box. So the students in 2nd through 5th grade can join, and they will have a play at the end of that. And in the next few weeks, maybe hopefully March, sometime in March, we'll add ukulele for 4th through 5th. We'll have choir for 2nd through 5th, art for 1st through 3rd. We're looking at soccer, and I think that could be K5 or various grade levels. And then we want some additional STEM classes for students. And we're looking for some opportunities for K as well. As you'll see, most of our things are in the upper grades, but we're looking for opportunities for our lower grade students as well.
Okay. Can I ask a quick question?
Sure.
Is the language like a beginner or?
Yes, this would be like an introduction level for our kindergarten through 2nd. It's going to be kind of basic, starting from the beginning.
Okay, thank you.
I have another question. Do we know, is that going to be throughout the week, potentially every afternoon, or is it?
These are 1 day a week classes. So the classes
Okay.
1 day a week. Most of them, so this afternoon, you're gonna get an email with sign up information and the actual dates and times. This is just a general overview, but it'll be once a week.
Okay. And could kids do more than one, or is it all at the same time?
So right
Potentially.
now we're prioritizing kids getting at least one because they are limited. And
Yeah.
I didn't mention this, but these are free to everyone. So there's no payment at all. So Vargas is providing these as opposed to an outside club where you can sign up. And our goal is that we get as many kids, some after school enrichment. So one right now. If
Okay.
no one is signing up for the classroom and your child wants it, they can get two, but ideally one option.
Okay. And for those who go to after school care, would they still be able to do some of this?
Yeah. Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so with the Right at School, you're talking about Right at School and
Yeah, I am. Yeah.
Yeah. So those programs, yes, they can join these as well. Those who have tutoring, we're trying to offer some time on days like Thursday and Friday as well, because students who go to after school tutoring, they already are in after school tutoring. So and we want to try to reach as many kids as possible, but we're starting small and then hoping to grow the program. So.
Do we have a time set in the day, like when these classes will be offered, or these will be at different times after school?
So all of these are after school. So our students do receive art and music throughout the day. They have STEAM classes throughout the week as well. They have PE in 1st through 5th grade every week, twice a week. And so some of these things are embedded, but these are after school classes that students would be taking.
Okay, so this is like from the regular class, plus if they're going to have a fitness, it will be an addition to what they have in the school. And so the class ends at will it be like from 3 o'clock or 4 o'clock, something like that? Is there a time set, or the times haven't been set yet?
So I will be sending out the information with the times attached because each class is going to be different. They're not all on the same day. Some are on Thursday, and all of them are after dismissal.
Okay.
So they're after upper grade dismissal. And so for our classes that include kindergarten, you would have to come back to campus with your kid for the after school.
Okay.
All right. So I want to talk a little bit about the local control accountability plan timeline. And so our district has worked to align all of the plans that we have. And so there's what's called the strategic plan, which is our 6-year plan for how we address the needs of our students, both from an instructional standpoint, but also from a social emotional, and also how we stay fiscally responsible. And so that plan is 6 years. So in 2021, we developed a 6-year plan. The state additionally requires every 3 years that we do a what's called an LCAP plan, and that's 3 years long. And so our strategic plan is 6. That takes us through 2 cycles of an LCAP plan. In addition to that, the LCAP has to be updated annually. And then I presented a little about earlier about this in our one of our coffees about our site plan. Each year, schools produce a site plan that aligns with the LCAP, that aligns with our strategic plan. And so that's just how we align and make sure all of our goals are really working towards the same goal as a district, as a state, and as a school. And so this explains a little bit more about that process. So in the LCAP, we have to address our 8 state priorities, and the actions have to align to what our state says we need to improve upon based on the California dashboard. This also is how we are funded from the federal government, from the state government. So our budgets have to align what our goals are. So if it's not in our goals, we really shouldn't be spending money on it. And so the LCAP, when we update, also includes a few extra things. And so one of the things is that we have to do an LCFF and that's a local control funding formula budget. And so we have to present to parents and other stakeholders how funding decisions are made. So there's a public accountability for the funds we spend. The LCAP also includes the annual update for any additional money that we spend. And then that's done around February. So we're working on that process right now. And then it also talks about the federal addendum aspect of it. And so every Student Succeeds Act, we may be familiar with the No Child Left Behind. That's my generation's. So that's the new federal law, that Every Student Succeeds Act, ESSA. And we talk about how we spend the district federal funds as well. And so the supplement has 5 narrative prompts that we have to answer. And I'll share with you the narrative prompts. I'll read a few, but you'll get the gist of what we have to do with that. And it identifies data and metrics that we've identified, and any updates that we want to make to the things. And again, what we know is when we get new information, we have to update. And so we may start with a plan and then we realize that that's not going to work. And so it provides some flexibility in our plan. And all of this has to be included in the updates, and it's presented at a board meeting. And all of this happens before February 28th. So we have a month to get through there. And these are the 5 prompts that we have to do. And so we respond to these. So an example, prompt 1, a description of how and when the LEA engage or plans to engage its educational partners on the use of funds provided through the Budget Act of 2021 that were not included in 21-22 local control ability plan. And so any additional funds that we're spending, we have to address that. Another example of things that we want to make sure that we do is, for example, here, we got some additional money for COVID-19. And so we have to write how we plan to use that one-time money to help students recover from the learning loss that was caused of the pandemic. And then again, the district responds to these 5 prompts and presents it in a public board meeting. And so our local control accountability plan, LCAP, addresses 8 state priorities. And these are the 8 here. I want to point out that the services for foster youth and the instruction of expelled students, those are handled at the county level and not at the district level, but we are accountable for students that we have in our school district who are foster youth, but it's addressed at the county level. But the other 6 areas, student engagement, parental involvement, course access, implementation of Common Core standards, basic services, schools climate, student achievement, and other student outcomes are all addressed in our LCAP. And so when you see our goals here, goal 1, develop and implement effective and consistent instructional practices that meet the needs of all students. That addresses state priorities 2, 4, 7, and 8. And so in our goals, it'll call out which priorities that we are addressing. And then we also have aligned that with our strategic plan goals as well. So, and again, all of these 5 goals are how we align how we spend our money. Okay. It is a living document, like I said before, we do that. And so this is an update of the timeline. So right now, we're sharing with all of our stakeholders, our ELACs, our school site councils, our parent groups, PTA. This is my way to share with the broader community is through the parent coffee. And what we do is we share the timeline, and then we want you to know that the survey is opening on the 31st through the 18th. And it's super important that you guys participate in the LCAP. And the reason why is we look at that data and that determines how we run our schools. And so an example of something that came from the LCAP is that parents said that we lacked after school enrichment for students. And so as part of that, the way we're addressing that is we're providing after school enrichment. Again, it's not for everyone yet, but we're hoping to expand this program so that every kid gets some sort of after school enrichment. That's one example. There's some examples about academic progress as well for our students who are struggling. Many parents feel like they needed something after school to support tutoring. And so we also added tutoring options as well. So the LCAP is important. It's important that you do it. We have paper copies as well as electronic copies. But it's important that you respond to that because we really do read it and try to respond to it as much as possible. February 10th, there at the board meeting, there's going to be a presentation for the supplement of the annual update that I was talking about a little earlier. In March, we're going to get the initial input and drafting of the annual update. They're going to start doing that initial draft. We're going to be reviewing the data in April. And then at the end of April, the LCAP draft is due. And from May, all of May, there will be a chance for you to publicly comment on the LCAP as it's the updated LCAP. And then there will be a presentation in May. That board meeting is a public hearing, so anyone in the district can come to that. We'll also be presenting at our ELACs, DLACs parent coffees as well. And then on June 16th, ideally, we will adopt our new LCAP for next year, updated LCAP for next year. So that's the timeline for that. Go ahead and ask the question.
I'm just curious, I know we've only been a school for a few years, but I'm curious to see what kind of involvement do you see in these surveys? Like how high is the response rate?
It is lower. The first year, I think we had maybe 125 parents respond. And again, we have families. And so how that relates to students, we only had 300 students. I'm not sure exactly. Last year was lower, and I think a lot of that had to do with the pandemic and people not really being connected with the school. And so this year we're hoping for more volunteers or for more parent involvement. What we do, and we pride ourselves on, is all of our students who are eligible to do the LCAP do it during the school day, because we also want input from the students and the teachers as well and staff members.
Yeah, I think it's great that you're doing this. I remember when my oldest was in elementary school at Landals, there were a lot of decisions being made and a lot of the parents didn't feel like they supported the decisions the district was making. And then they said, well, we're making these based on these surveys. And a lot of people didn't realize how important they were. So I'm glad that you're doing this little informational thing. The other question I have about it is sometimes I fill out the school surveys from our district and it'll say, I mean, obviously it's tough because I've got 4, right? Is this one specific to Vargas, or is this just because sometimes they'll say base this on your oldest child in the district, and so I'm then thinking about Crittenden. Is this one for specific to Vargas, or is it for all the district?
So, and this is the tricky part too, right? When you have kids at multiple schools, they do it on the oldest student, and when you think about your oldest student, you would mark Crittenden, and so it would go into the Crittenden section of the.
My feedback isn't going to go to you guys at all anyway. Could I have my husband do it for the boys and I do it for the girls? Okay, maybe I'll do that.
Yeah, and so that's a great way to solve that issue. And there's feedback that district gets, and so there could be a general, like, in our district, these are things that want to change, and then it could be at my specific site, these are things that also I want to change. And so I'm thinking about it from a global standpoint and as a district. And so what we often see is trends as a district. And so the board will, they'll present out what the district is saying. And so after school enrichment is actually something that all schools would benefit from, according to the surveys. And part of that, and I think I've explained this in several meetings about how we can advertise outside after school enrichment versus if we are providing it, how we can actually offer that to students. And so that's kind of the fuzziness of it. And so in the middle school, I know that Spanish, they want Spanish in their schools, and it's really hard right now to find a Spanish teacher, because if you can teach Spanish in middle school, you can also teach in high school, and the high school district locally pays a lot more. And so we've had trouble keeping our Spanish teachers in middle school. Having experience working at Graham, I know that firsthand. So, but course variety is something that parents have shared with the district and specifically Vargas that they would like to see. All right. Of course, if you have questions later on, you can ask them. I'm going to move on to the iReady data and share some updates or some overview of the data. I'm going to go through the slides and explain early on. I'll explain a little more and then I'll just kind of breeze through. I'm going to be sharing both of these presentations later. And so if you want to peruse through the data a little more carefully, I'll give that to you so you can do that. And so again, going back to our strategic plan, goal number 1 is effective and consistent instructional practices that meets the needs of all students. And in order to know that you're meeting the needs of students, you have to have some way of tracking the data that you do. And so we're looking at the growth that we have for our students. And so I'll start with reading. And so you'll know if it's Vargas or district. I did put a label here at the top. So this is district-wide, the growth from trimester 1 to trimester 2, or diagnostic 1 to diagnostic 2. And so what you will see, and I'll explain this, there's a faint color and then there's a bold color. Faint always refers to the D1 and the dark color is D2. And so in D1, in the district, 52% of students were proficient in reading. In D2, 63% were proficient, tier 1. The yellow tier means that they are 1 grade level behind. And so we had 28% and we shrunk that to 21%. Red is tier 3, and that is 2 or more years behind grade level. And that as a district went from 20% to 15%. These down here show the extremes. And so there's a 5 level as well. So these are students who are above grade level. This is showing how many are actually above grade level. And this is significantly. So this is maybe 2 years. This is 3 years below grade level. So you can look at it that way as well. So this is Vargas. And so when you look at the data, you see that we went from 52 to 67%, which is similar to the district. And then here, I like to point out the ends here, how many students who were far below grade level. So tier 3, 14%, and we've shrunk that to 10%. So that's similar to what's happening in the district, if you look at a comparison. So this is looking at the schools and comparing them so you can see how we are doing here. And I'll note here that some of the data is a little bit different because the district took this a little earlier than I took my data screenshots and more kids added to the testing pool. But you'll see here for Vargas, you can see it as a graphic form here, how many kids grew. And you do want to see the green get bigger. You want to see the red decrease. The yellow can increase or decrease depending on if they're coming from the green or the red. Because we increased our green, you're seeing most likely that our increase in our yellows are decreasing and the reds are going to the yellows, if that makes any sense. So you can see that here.
Nice job on that.
Yeah. And so this
Good
is
try.
showing, yeah. And so this is a comparison. So how we can see in comparison how we did with the district. So this is on grade level, on or above grade level, trimester 1, trimester 2. And if you look at Vargas, we increased 16 percentage points, right? And so if you look, that's Montaloma is the only school that outperformed us in terms of increasing where students were. We have the similar as Bub and Stevenson for reading increases. And how this helps us really understand is that holistically, schools like MI, schools like Stevenson, overall, their kids start or have 81 percentage points. That's significantly higher number of students on grade level. But in terms of how we're growing students, it's a similar trend. And ideally, that's what we want, is all kids to grow. And so we're looking at how students grow, not just absolutes. Absolutes are important, but how we grow students is also important. Okay. And so this is by grade level, and what we see across the district, so this is at the district level, is that students in kindergarten tend to grow more than our students in 5th grade. So in kindergarten, the number of students who were at grade level went from 45% to 69%, 25 points, whereas in 5th grade, it's only 8 percentage points. The content is harder. It's students are further behind the older they grow. And so this is harder for them to make that progress and growth. And then in the earlier grades. This is Vargas, and you see a similar trend here. We went from 41% to 76%. And so the kindergarten teachers are doing a really great job. 1st grade, we see that growth that they're making. We do see here in 3rd grade, we're a little stagnant. The number of students who are proficient stayed the same. And we decreased the number of red percentage points, but we have a lot of work to figure out what's going on there. When I was explaining this last night to our ELAC, one of the hypotheses that I have is that these students were in 1st grade at the start of the pandemic. And so looking at reading their foundational skills, they never got the end of 1st grade. And then their 2nd grade, where they start to practice and solidify reading skills, was during remote learning, right? And so there was some growth made last year, but I think that impacted their ability to really be solid in their skills. And you can see, well, I'll show a little bit later about breakdown in specific skill, and you'll see that in their phonics ability. And so this is breaking it down by subcategory. And so we look at it holistically, but then we also break it down by specific category. So English learners are students who speak English as a 2nd language or have a language other than English spoken in the home. We got our English only students. We've got our reclassified students. So these were students who were former ELLs who were proficient on one of the tests and have high enough English skills. SWD is students with disabilities, or students with disabilities, and SED are socioeconomically disadvantaged. These are our free and reduced qualified students. And so when you look here, you do see a discrepancy, right? Our English learners are at 35%, whereas our English only students are at 75% proficient. What is of note, though, is that our English learners who have reclassified have the highest of the 3 categories. So if students reclassify, they outperform our students who are English only, right? And that kind of makes sense in that to be able to reclassify, you have to be proficient. And so we do see that. And so this is the change from the district-wide. So growth district-wide of English language earners, EOs, RFEPs, and so forth. There's about an 8 percentage gain change in those categories, 9 for English only. And then we can look here for our Asian, white, and Hispanics. And as you'll see, there is a discrepancy between our Asian population, our Hispanic population, and our white population. And so this tells us is that we have a lot of work to do in certain categories to grow students. So our Hispanic students, our students with disabilities, our students who are economically disadvantaged, and our English learners, really we have to do more to support those students. Doesn't mean that we're leaving these students out and not doing anything for them, but we also need to put a hyper laser focus on those students who really need our help. And so this category is here. This is for Vargas Elementary. This is a comparative reading subgroups. And this is the growth just in those subgroups for Vargas. And what you'll see for the district, it was 9% percentage change. We have 17%. So we are doing well in helping our ELs grow, but we have to do more to make them grow even more. Our categories where we're not having the most growth are students who are socioeconomically disadvantaged and our Asian populations. Our Asian population is doing well, but we could do better to keep the pace with the growth that we have with other students. And what this also demonstrates is that people often talk about the one way to close the achievement gap is to just lower the bar, right? And so we bring our students who are at the top down so that they meet the middle. That's one way people talk about it. But what you'll see here is that our English language learners are growing 17%, but our English only students are also growing at a similar rate. And so we may not be decreasing the achievement gap per se, but we are decreasing how many students who are proficient so that we can close that achievement gap. That's what we want to do, is meet the ceiling, not lower the ceiling. So we can see that here with that data. Okay, and then this is what I was talking about, the needs. So looking at this data, what we have here is PA stands for phonemic awareness. Phonemic awareness is the sounds that words, or that the sounds in English, and understanding how those sounds work together. And so this is talking about like things like rhyming. Does this word rhyme with this? Can you hear the sounds in a word? So if I say cat, do you hear k, at? Do you hear those three sounds, that there's three sounds in there? And so a word like trying to think of a word like still has still. So there are four sounds in still, even though there are 5 letters. And letters, when you start to add the letters, that's phonics. And so what sounds correspond to letters? And so knowing that k, at is a C letter, even though the k sound could be made with a C or a K. So that would be phonics instruction, is what sounds letters make. High frequency words, you'll hear your teachers refer to them as sight words as well. And those are the words that when you read, you just see it and you know the words and, for, but, a, I. In kindergarten, they have the 20 sight words that they send home with you and you practice that. As a proficient English reader, most words are sight words for us. We just know them. We don't sound them out and do it phonetically. Vocabulary is knowing the meanings of words and thinking about how those relate. And so in upper grades, it looks like prefixes, suffix, and Greek and Latin roots to see how those words are interconnected. Literature and info refer to comprehension. Literature is stories, whereas info is informational text. And so what this chart is showing you is what students still need. And so I'll give you an example. At the beginning in trimester 1, 54% of our students needed help with phonemic awareness. In trimester 2, only 19% of students needed help with phonemic awareness. And so you want to see a decrease in the scores. And so you kind of see that with all of the ones in kindergarten, there's a decrease, because that means that kids understand that. What we do see here at Vargas is that for phonemic awareness, once you get to 3rd grade, our students understand the sounds of words. So that's great. This one shows, so if you look at that chart, this is the area of need for our students. So in kindergarten, it's phonics and vocabulary. In 5th grade, it's vocabulary and informational comprehension. So that's where they struggled the most. Across our grade, informational comprehension is an area of need. And so we're going to do some work as a group to do that. And then vocabulary also comes out quite frequently. Across all grade levels, the area where we are kind of knocking it out of the park is phonological awareness. So that's good to know. And what I was saying earlier about 3rd grade, what you'll see here is about 31% of our students still have phonics instruction that they're struggling with. And going back to 1st and 2nd grade, that makes sense because they had the pandemic impact there. If you look at our 4th and 5th grade students, that doesn't exist really. And I think that's my hypothesis, is that that's part of the pandemic had an impact on that for the students. I mean, you can even see in for a 2nd grade, the 47%, almost half of the kids, phonics is an area of struggle. And again, they missed the end of kindergarten, and 1st grade was online for them. And so this makes sense. And so we're doing things to address that. I'll go into math data. I'll go a little quicker at math data because I don't have to explain some of the fundamentals. So I'll just show the slides and kind of talk through them. So this is the district, 42%, 57, and then a decrease 22 to 15%. Looking here, let me find Vargas. So Vargas, we got 36% to 58%. So there's growth there. And then if you look at the number of students in the red, we almost half that, which is a good thing. I will say that overall, our math scores are lower than our reading scores. And I think that's a trend in the district. And part of that, there's some research from the pandemic, is that math is taught more formally. And so kids don't kind of stumble across how to do multiplication of fractions. And so it has to be explicitly taught. And because the pandemic shortened our days, it shortened the amount of instruction that we had, kids didn't get as solid of an understanding of the math. But you'll see here, we still have some significant growth. Again, we're behind Montaloma, but ahead of the other schools in terms of our growth for students. So kids at Vargas are learning. That's what I'm taking away from this. So that's a good thing. We are starting lower than other schools in our district, but with the students that we have, we are making progress. And I think that's what we want to focus on with our students. And this is the comparative math from school. So this chart shows in-person, virtual, and in-person before pandemic. So before the pandemic in math, we were at 56%. During the pandemic, we actually shot up to 60%. My hypothesis there is that some parents over-assisted in some of the tests because it was done remotely. But you'll see here, there's a little growth, but overall it's kind of the same as before the pandemic. So this is by grade level and a similar thing that we saw before in growth. And here is how we're doing with our English learners and all of that. So 35% for English learners, 66% for our English only students. Our RFEP students aren't outperforming in math, but it's similar to English only students. Our students with disabilities are doing the worst in their math. And so we got to work on kind of supporting students with that. And then our students who are economically disadvantaged, our free and reduced students, are here at 20%. So these areas are where we're struggling the most. English learners, we're also struggling across the board for English and math. And then this is for Vargas, our growth. And again, if we focus on the growth, we're making significant growth with our students in our categories. Our students with disabilities and our RFEP students are our lowest here. But there's significant growth in our English learners, our English only students, our Asian students, and our white students. Our Latino students are actually making some good growth as well. And so this is the comparison for ethnicity. So we got our Asian students at 78%, and there's a huge discrepancy with our Hispanic Latino students. And then our white students are at 69% behind our Asian students. So there's work to be done. We are making progress, but there's still work to be done, a lot of work to be done. And so this is the needs analysis for math. And so we have numbers and operations. So for our students. Numbers and operations are counting in kinder and first grade, but then addition, subtraction, multiplication. Algebra, we've got MS, which stands for measurement. And so, you know, measurement, it's measurement. Rulers, weights, kilograms, and then geometry here. And so what you'll see here in our needs is that our top area of need for 3rd through 5th grade is geometry. And just so you know, our curriculum, geometry is always the last unit taught. And so oftentimes it's not practiced as much. And so our kids often skip geometry aspects of it, or don't get as solid of an instruction on it because that's around testing. Our kids in 1st grade, numbers and operations are their highest area of need. And my hypothesis there is that in kindergarten and 1st grade, everything is hands-on. So they physically touch materials. And during the pandemic, we didn't have as many manipulatives available. We sent a few things home, but generally from day to day, kids are always touching, they're cutting, they're having that hands-on experience, they're counting out loud and singing. And during remote school, that just didn't happen as much and as robustly as we do now. And so our 1st grade students this year, our 1st grade teachers kind of identified that early on. And so we bought a bunch of manipulatives so that they can have that work in class. And so that's kind of what we're seeing here. Across the board, algebra, kids are doing well in algebra. So that's a highlight. And so what are our next steps? And so as a school, we've looked at the data whole class, our whole site. Teachers look at their class data. And then as a grade level, we also look at the data and see what trends are in each grade. But one thing that we also do is we look at actual individual students. And so I have erased the names of students for privacy reasons, but each student that's highlighted represents an actual individual student. And so the color that's highlighted, so student 15, I'll start in this one because it'll be easier. So student 41, highlighted in red, that's where they were 1st trimester. 2nd trimester is their placement on the chart. And so 41 was 2 years, 2 or more grade levels below in trimester 1. This trimester, they're only 1 grade level below. And so you can see their growth. So this is a good way for us to physically see how kids are doing. And what we do is these students increase their placement. So from trimester 1 to trimester 2, they've increased their placement. These students have decreased their placement. And this is a concern for us, especially the student number 42 and these students here. These students, we kind of, we're worried about them, but not as worried. They are still proficient. They just didn't, they went down, like they may have been at mid 5th grade and they went down to early 5th grade or something like that. And so we're worried about those, but this lets us see how students are doing individually and make plans of action for students. And so the next step after students, teachers have done that, is that they create a plan of action for each student. And so student 1 on that list corresponded. This student needed help with phonics. And so our teachers made, during guided reading, they're gonna have the letter sounds 3 times a week with the iReady lessons. They're gonna tutor after school on Monday and Tuesdays. They're gonna teach 1-to-1 letter correspondence with those 2 students who need that intense intervention. Then they have plans for other students in the group here. They're gonna be using the read alouds to build vocabulary, continue to explore word relationships with them. So our teachers are identifying what specifically is gonna work with those students. And then ideally during the parent-teacher conference, your teacher also shared strategies that they're doing with your student as well. And so what we're gonna be doing is we continue to meet on Wednesdays, we have our staff meetings to make plans for that. We're gonna be training teachers and developing teachers on our our reading comprehension. what are some strategies for informational text? Mr. Hillman and Mr. Gorman were planning recently, and they were talking about guiding students through the test, an example of how they would answer those questions so that the students kind of see the thought process behind why a certain test question would be asked this way. Because they're also saying that in classroom, the students can read nonfiction, but for some reason on iReady test, they're not having as much success. And some of that could be that they're not highlighting in the same way. So the kids aren't underlining text or finding specific evidence. And so Mr. Hillman and Mr. Gorman are gonna help me plan something for the staff to walk kids through that process. Similarly, we just had a math differentiation because we also see that our students who are above grade level in math don't make as much growth. And so we're looking at adding enrichment in the day for math classrooms. And so how do we add projects? How do we add alternative math lessons for those students? Okay. So that's the data presentation. Hopefully it was insightful for you guys. Do you have any questions about the data?
Not about the data, but I have a question like, so my kid is in the 5th grade, like, and how ready they will be for the 6th grade with the math. They're falling behind, and it might be more pressure on them when they go to 6th grade.
Yeah. So I think when we talk about specific children, so this is, I can talk globally about kind of how we support kids. Keep in mind that all of our students are going through a pandemic. And so this kind of impacts all of our students similarly. And that's just, we're adjusting and that the adjustment will happen in the middle school as well. Specific to your child, I think we could set up a meeting to talk about specifically what we could do for them. But as a school, that's what we're working on, is trying to figure out how do we make sure that we get kids as prepared and as ready as possible, looking at the data that we have, what their needs are. But then for your specific kid, it may be something completely unique or different that we want to address as well. So let's talk about that offline rather than publicly, if that's okay.
Yeah. Thank you.
I'll share a success story that has to do with Vern really quick. So my 5th grade, my daughter who's now in 6th grade was in 5th grade, and her older sister had been in advanced math at middle school at Crittenden, and I think she just assumed that she would be too. And when she got her assessment at the end of the year in 5th grade, she realized she was just 3 points or 4 points shy of the cutoff for being in advanced math in middle school. And she came home in tears. She was so upset. And we talked to Vern, and he said, follow this guidelines. And I think it was the Khan Academy lessons.
Mm-hmm.
And work on it over the summer. And they retest, Lakshmi, they retest your students in the very beginning of school before like the first couple of weeks of middle school. So she actually, when middle school started, she was slated to be in the middle class. But she had worked over the summer really hard on these Khan Academy lessons. And when they retested her those first weeks of middle school, she tested high enough to be in the middle or in the advanced class. And she has been able to maintain high scores throughout the year in that class and be successful because of the work she did over the summer. So Vern will help you out. He'll take care of you.
Thank you for that. And I do want to say that with our iReady assessments for 5th grade, just so, because there may be other 5th grade parents who don't know this, the math assessment for iReady is used as a placement for students. And so oftentimes our 5th grade students at the end of the year are like, this doesn't matter and don't take it as seriously. We try to reinforce that with them. But as parents, if you could just also reinforce with your kid that like, this for them is a high stakes test. And we don't want to put pressure on them. Wherever they are is where they are. But if they're a student who kind of is smart, but kind of quick with the pen in terms of doing like, I just want to get this over with, it will have an impact on them. And so it's super important to take the test seriously, as you should take all tests, but take it seriously.
Thank you. Thank you, Christina, too. for the information.
Any other questions? So thank you for starting with that, that one. It's open. We have about 7 minutes. I'll take any other questions that you have about any other thing as well. Doesn't have to be anything we covered today.
Vern, I have a quick question, and this can be taken offline later, and I almost don't know if it affects the elementary school, so maybe I should direct it to the middle school, but I have several friends in other districts around the state who they're starting to see that their districts are no longer, how do I even say it? They're no longer having levels of math in their school. Like they're throwing that out, and just they say that it's mind-boggling to me. And I guess some of it is based on a little bit of research from a woman professor at Stanford, but it's contrary to a lot of research that I've read in the past. So it's kind of confusing, but anyway, that they're throwing out the different levels of math and saying that they're going to put everyone on the same level.
Mhm.
You know, I haven't been to any of the district meetings recently, but I haven't heard anything in our district. I hope that's not something that they would do. I know several families who are moving out of California because of this,
Mhm.
and it would have huge impacts on our district as well. Have you heard anything about our district leaning that direction?
So I haven't heard anything, and there hasn't been any information shared about moving towards that. What I will say is that when Common Core was implemented or enacted in 2010, there was a push statewide to have combined math instead of leveled math. And so, or it's called integrated math. And so the idea behind that is that you don't go, algebra, geometry, algebra 2, trig, calculus, but each year kids get a piece of all of it. And so it's more integrated and more aligned to how people would learn math in other countries. And so that was the intent of Common Core. And I think we were slow to transition, and the high school didn't make that transition, so it didn't make sense for our middle schools to make that transition. And so I think we're trying to be in alignment with what Los Altos and the high schools are doing. And right now they level math. And so to give our kids the best chance at being successful in high school, it makes sense for us to level math. But that is more of a district question, and I don't think they've made that decision or talked to us about that specifically.
Okay, thanks.
All right, any other questions?
Will there be state testing this year?
Yes, that's a great question. Thank you for that. So we are scheduled to start state testing this year. We generally test in late April, May. And I think we're gonna be in that same timeline. So after spring break, what typically happens is we start training the students on how to actually interact with the test. It's super important for us because our current fifth graders have never taken the state test. And so they'll have to be trained. Normally we do a really intense training with third graders, and then fourth and fifth graders just a refresher. But this year, third, fourth, and fifth will all need that training about how the test works. It's very specific that you have to answer a question before you can click to the next one, which can be tricky for kids. As a kid, I learned that if you don't know a question, skip it and then come back to it later. And you can't really do that with us. And so some kids spend hours on this test because they're just stuck on that. So we're going to be working with that. So
Oh, okay. So it will be online, right?
it's online. Yes, it's done online. If you would like, I can share with you the website where you can kind of see what it looks like. It's available publicly online for samples, and that's what we practice with the students, is how to
That would be
navigate this.
great. Can you please forward that information?
Yeah.
I think that's all the questions I have. Thanks a lot.
Yeah. So if you give me a quick second, I will actually just put it in the chat right now for you, so that you can see the practice test. And so on the website, there are practice tests and there are training tests. The practice tests are for the grade level, and the training tests are to see how the different tools work. And I can share with you the screen in the last 2 minutes so you can kind of see what that looks like. If you give me a quick second. So when you go to this website, you can click here where it says student interface. And so this shows the students how they would do it. And you can log in as a guest. And so you go through and we'll select 5th grade. And then so you can see here all the options that you have. And so you can do a practice test or you can do the training test. And so I'm going to do the training test so you can kind of see the thing. And so there's ELA and math. I'll do ELA. And you just go through and you just click select. And then to check the sound, you have to check the sound to make sure because there are visual or audio elements to the test as well. And so the intent behind the training test is not so your kid can practice skills, is really so they get used to the test. And so you'll see here, they have to read, it scrolls on this side independently over here. And so you have, this question has 2 parts. So you have to answer A, and then A depends on, or sorry, part B depends on A. So if I were to just say answer A, but I skip B, what you'll see, what your kid will get, it should say that they can't answer it, but I'll go on and you'll see here, what is the most likely reason an author final, and they have to pick 2 choices. So these are one of the things that's tricky because you can't just pick one. You're supposed to, the most likely, it says pick 2 choices. Often our kids will pick one, or they don't read carefully, or they just highlight them all. So they have to be careful about what they're doing. And so you'll see here, there are some things on there like zooming out and zooming in that we want the kids to be able to practice with. And then there's a line reader where they can click and it highlights the lines for them. And so there's these different features that we want to train the students on. And then let me zoom out. Zoom out. And so I forgot what it says right here. The student wants to revise this task, read the draft of the opinion article and complete the task. It says, click on the sentence in the draft that's in the wrong place. And so the kids have to click on the one sentence that they have. And so here you can see I've highlighted them all, but it's the one sentence that is in the wrong place. And that's difficult for kids who haven't had this practice doing that, right? And so in class, we don't necessarily ask, that's not a natural thing to ask students to do, is to click or circle the one thing that doesn't belong. When we ask kids to write, we just ask them to write and they edit and revise their own work, but it's rare that they edit other people's work. And so that's difficult for kids. And so we have to train them that that's something that they're going to be doing. And then you just go through and these are select 2. So again, you can go through with your child, or you can go through yourself. As a school, we're going to go through with the kids. So I wouldn't spend so much time at home with your child doing it. But for your own purposes, just review it. You can look through it. Okay. All right. Any other questions before we go? All right. I hope you guys have a nice Friday. I'll see you guys at pickup. Bye.